Excited about that. Super. Okay, so we are live, and my name is Rajat, and I have the pleasure of having Greg Melia joining me, CEO CXPA, and amazing to have you, Greg, at a short notice. It's pleasure. Welcome.
Raja, it's a pleasure to be with you and with everyone who's tuning in from across India and around the world. What a beautiful day here in Columbia, South Carolina. The sun is shining. It's a little bit colder than I'd like. So I hope that the weather and the sun are treating you well as you end the day, Raja.
Actually, I mean, spot on. It's been pretty decent weather here. We neither very cold nor very hot. It's optimum weather. I'm in Pune, which is close to Mumbai. So weather is lovely, I think. So spot on that. And on a lovely day, we are together talking CX. I think it makes it even better.
Yeah, it's nice to have a silver lining and an opportunity like this in a year that's been so crazy. And to be able to talk about the hope and the things that can help create a brighter future. So honored to spend some time with you.
Super, Greg. So I'm going to really ask you a few questions. And since you talked about hope and we are really ending this crazy 2020, I would really want you to leave us with some hope for CX professionals all over the world who are tuning in and going to watch this conversation. So share something which you think is truly positive you're looking forward in 2021 when it comes to CX.
Yeah, there were a couple of silver linings in 2020 that should give great hope to us all. And that is some projects that we've been looking at and hoping to advance over the past several years have really started to flourish. And in fact, I think they've taken root and will continue to be able to build on them. For many people, the idea of telemedicine and telehealth was a pipe dream. How could we bring medical advice and service to people without having them to have the hassle of leaving their home and wait in a doctor's office? And how could we help them have better access to their medical records and have a more seamless experience onto their pharmacy and onto their home care providers? And that's an area where the unfortunate elements of the pandemic has actually really expedited the collaboration, the data exchange, the voice of the customer, the orientation, and most importantly, the adoption by customers as well. So that's a sector that's been doing great. Some similar elements in banking, in finance, as we look at people transitioning there. Certainly home services and home delivery. So some sectors, I think, with CX have really moved forward. And one of my favorite early things in the pandemic was hearing the story of a retail chain that had a 2.5-year plan to have curbside pickup incorporated, and they rolled it out in 2 weeks instead of 2.5 years.
Wow, amazing. I think, on that I heard Satya Nadella, CEO Microsoft, quoting really that what could have been possible in 2 years happened in 2 months. But what you're sharing is even more phenomenal, right? 2 years plan in 2 weeks, it's unbelievable. And thanks for sharing, the aspect of caring for the patient through remote processes, right? I was listening to Wall Street Journal's one of the events where they brought in Cleveland Clinic CXO, Chief Experience Officer, and she shared they have been really started to use design thinking to drive empathy in their staff, even though it's been tough year for the support staff. Yet it's been really, like you talked about, it's been really in terms of transformational year for them to try new things to support their supporting their patients as well as their staff, right? So that was amazing. And how would you see, Greg, the customer experience as a domain? What maturity has it got in your visibility that you have seen around the globe?
Yeah, 2020, when we came into 2020 as CXPA, we had a hope and we had a plan. And that hope was that we would bring together the CX community with some common definitions. And we thought that we would achieve that by bringing people together in person in Orlando, back in April.
Wow.
Turns out, didn't come together in person, but wow, have we made progress as a group of professionals to come together and agree that, there's a couple things that we need to realize is there is a common definition for customer experience, and we need to work collectively as an organization, as a group of people, to stop arguing over the nuances between one definition and another, and get behind the consensus definition that CXPA has brought forward, that customer experience is the perception that a customer has of a brand across all touch points and people and technology across time. The second, and this is one that I want to be able to pick your brain and talk about, Rajat, is really this idea that CX professionals end up practicing in a variety of different mechanisms. Sometimes they're an employee. Sometimes they're an independent contractor. Sometimes they're a consultant. Sometimes they're an employee on staff who doesn't have CX in their title, but is charged with helping with customer experience. And so a big focus on us this year and leading into next year is that idea. Let's have a conversation about what does it mean to be a CX professional?
So I think if you're asking me, first of all, I really want to compliment CXPA and you really for coming up with a very simple vision, mission, and a customer experience professional's definition. And I just want to share with you, when many years back I asked a room full of vice presidents, senior leaders, what do you mean by customer experience? And interestingly, everybody had a different definition, and that was an IT services company. And typically, and I have worked on in different industries, each one, that story of blind men holding one part of the elephant, so right. So that's what I learned. But simply put, I would say the other thing is there's a lot of confusion sometimes between customer service, customer experience, and all those versions of that. For me, customer experience is about being able to connect at a human level, as a service provider, as a professional, and leave the customer feeling better than what they came with, right? And anything under that, you call those systems. You have a strategy, the vision, the culture, the design thinking. In fact, design thinking starts with empathy, right? So I would say for me, I play out big time on empathy and emotion, because that's also a differentiator and a key element which is not easy to replicate, which is not easy to really deliver, right? So that's probably someone who is able to serve at a human level and make customers feel better.
So 100% on target. That if you think about this last year and you think about the companies that have been successful, they haven't been successful because they had chosen a specific, NPS as their metric. They haven't been successful because they have a particular voice of the customer platform. They haven't been successful because they're using certain technology. They've been successful because they have leaders who understand that their job is to bring together their employees and their organization to look at the tools that they have, to hear and relate to what their customers are experiencing, and to pivot and deliver the experience that the customers are looking for, not because that's what you designed 6 months ago to get your NPS score up, but because that's what they need today. That's what they need tomorrow. That's what they need for the next, series of purchases. So that idea of empathy, that idea of bringing people together as a catalyst, and that idea of working together, those to me are the key competencies. It's not the question of a metric or software, and that's so easy to get lost in. I don't know if you saw it, Rajat. Yesterday, one of our customer experience and customer success superstar duos released a 12 days of CXmas song on LinkedIn. And it was great to see so many different familiar faces and all the rest coming through. But, you know, the things that were focused in that song were the symptoms and the outcomes. You know, there were the 5 broken links, you know, 2 spam emails, you know, and I agree. Those are all the things that distract us, the tyranny of the everyday flow. But, you know, the real thing, and I think every single one on that video would agree, is what's behind a great CX program is a great CX professional who looks beyond that moment and says, how do we design the system? How do we make the customer happier?
Yeah, I think thanks for sharing. I would love to see that in completion. What you're talking about, quite intriguing. I think everybody who's watching us, listening us, Greg has pointed you to something really interesting around CX, right? This is a song, Greg. This is something which is like quite because I haven't seen it yet.
But yeah, take a look. Either I think it was Shep Hyken and. Okay. James Dodkins, who released it on LinkedIn yesterday. But a ton of fun. And you know what? Anything that gets us talking about CX and customer success, because they were talking about both, and they made a big point to point that out, customer service, customer success. Anything that gets us talking about it is good. What's better is when we talk about customer experience through a more holistic way and get people beyond that symptoms conversation.
Yeah, right. I think I'm reminded by, you know, about a conversation of one of the leading authorities in CSM, customer success management. As you know, you're right, we need to look at it holistically. She's also a CXO with a 50 billion organization, a leader, and she clarified what you just said, that when we look at, I mean, there was a conversation, what's the difference between customer success and customer experience? And of course, I mean, like you, I would say customer experience is more holistic, and customer success is something which is really focused around making customers successful with whatever they are supposed to use. It's a product, it's a service, but eventually experience kind of is, it's like, you know, that nirvana state, the evolved state of service, right? So no questions on that. And like you can only reach nirvana when you have a healthy mind, body, heart, and soul, right? So similarly, a healthy experience, a positive experience, is a culmination of different components coming together. And I think that's what I also love about CXP. And I haven't seen anything more authentic, deep, and comprehensive like CXPA 6 competencies, right? I know we are talking about now, you know, revamping it, and it can only get better. But now I want to know from you, and while I'm asking, I'm just want to ask Greg, but thank you. Somebody just shared, I can see LinkedIn user, I can't see the name. 12 Days of CXmas by Shep Hyken and James Dotkin is legendary. And Shep Hyken, yes, thank you very much for sharing that. And I'm happy to have, you know, if you have any questions for Greg, this is a great opportunity to ask your CX related question to, you know, Greg himself. So Greg, I want to know from you, what this is so amazing, these 6 competencies. What's your view, and how is it going to evolve? I mean, tell us the power of this, because I'm excited to, every time I use it, my whole world is around this, right? So what's your guidance, take on
you
that?
know, so for you and I are so deep into this that we are probably well aware of the way that the 6 different competencies came together. But let me take a moment to just talk about that in case people aren't. What differentiates CXPA from many of the other pieces that are out there is that when we have a problem that we want to solve, we use the same methodology every single time. And that is to go out and to talk to our members and to gather information on what they're actually doing in the real world, to use that to guide the development of our recommendation. It's not recommended based on what we think is best for some shareholders, or what's best for the next release of a software platform, or what's best for our consulting business. The question is, what does the community say? And so what we did for the original CX framework is to do a survey. And in that survey, I think we heard from more than 200 individuals about what they do on a daily basis and what's important to the success of their CX program. And of course, when we did that, we heard similarities and we heard differences. And what we tried to do was to distill that down into a outline that says, what are the key similarities? You may not do voice of the customer the same way, but voice of the customer is important. And to be able to bring in those 6 different CX competency areas, to bring in the supporting tasks that go with them. Of course, we all know that the world is changing quite a bit. And that the change that's happening, some of that is a difference of scope. So all of a sudden our voice of the customer program is being done. You and I probably remember, Rajat, back when times when feedback was coming into us by fax. The world has changed, thank goodness. And so on one side, we need to keep up with the technological change and the process change and those paces. But the second side of that is that we also have a shift in conversations that happen across time. And so, for example, I think one of the areas that we'll see shift or change in the future is we currently separate the idea of customer centricity from accountability. And we believe that, in fact, those two things are so inextricably linked together that we need to talk about them together instead of implying that they're two different things. And you know what? The reality is all of the CX competencies are interrelated. So I bet you have trouble when you teach people preparing for the CCXP. If someone really called and said, well, is this voice of the customer, or is this customer centricity, or is this employee experience? It's probably a little bit of a mix of each.
I always think absolutely. First of all, I think I like this idea. In fact, definitely, it's when you've listened and if you're combining this, it's a really good move, because culture and governance, as we would say, or organizational adoption and change, they're so intertwined, and you cannot. The same examples keep popping up when we are telling stories of both of these. At least in terms of teaching people what is governance and what's culture. I think so that's really a good move, because that will really be able to make it more holistic. At least these two competencies together will become more holistic, right? So that's great. And you're right. I always, it's really interesting to see how each of these are so well connected. And that's what I really admire about this set of competencies. Whenever it was taught, right, whatever thought has gone in, it's really, I would say it's a MBA of customer experience. It's like completely everything that you need to know is here. Of course, so much has changed, and you talked about the voice of customer and, fax days to today's, the social media, tools which can capture real time. You have so many other ways of being able to listen to your customer and quickly change, if you will. If you really want, you have everything you need to know about the customer and do something about it, right? So really, fully VOC is very, very powerful. But whoever is taught, and you've really now probably that's CXPA competencies version 2. I don't know, Greg, what version is this? But I'm sure it's going to be. Only thing is we'll have to do a little bit of work to. I really like the 6, and I've got everywhere 6.
That's 6, right. 6, and it's sort of like when we were going through college, and they issued a new edition of the textbook, and right. You were like, do I have to buy the new version of the textbook? Do I have to learn new things? And what you find is that 95% of the underlying theory in spaces have stayed together. Some new things have been introduced, and some things have probably been moved around a little bit. But there are a couple things that I'd also call people's attention to, and then I want to pick up on this MBA comment that you made. So a couple of other things that I think you'll see as we move forward with CCXP and the framework. I think you're going to continue to see an acknowledgement that processes are becoming more intertwined as well. So now you have voice of the customer and listening programs that may be replacing some traditional methods of gathering feedback in spaces. You're having sort of more direct analytics and insights that are brought out of activity that's happening in your organization, rather than a traditional question of let's ask the customer and react to it. The two things complement one another, and they serve different purposes. But when it comes to a practical area, if you're going to lead a CX program, you need to be prepared for these things before your company asks you to do them. And that's the beauty of CCXP and the framework is it helps you to think ahead, and think on those spaces. I think you're going to see more awareness that CX programs are a balance of people and technology and processes. So we'll see more impact from AI and how insights can come from AI to be something that a CX professional needs to be aware of. But this question, is employee experience replacing CX, or is AI replacing the customer service representative or the CX professional? No. What we really need at the heart of it all is that idea back on the empathy side. And so that's what I think that we'll continue to see a ton of growth. This last year has been fantastic for the CCXP program. We're now up over 1,138 CCXPs the last time I looked at the directory online. And that's because people can now take the exam online and they can get great training, that's delivered remote as well. So if you're out there and you're thinking, should I earn the CCXP? You've got a great mentor there in Rajat, and you've got a lot of resources at what is www.ccxp.org.
Super. Thank you, Greg, for sharing that. In fact, again, another acknowledgement to you and team for really making it virtual now. And I was telling someone and they couldn't believe it. They said, "Oh, really? Sitting behind a computer at my home?" Right? I said, yes, it's possible, but you have to take care of few things. But CXPA has made it possible. So a big thank you to you, because that really solves a lot of problem. And especially, in a lot of places, we don't have centers close by, right? So that really is really commendable.
Yeah, and another silver lining of the pandemic, and something that all of us should think about with our own businesses. Where have we made it more difficult than it needs to be for the customer? And what possibilities can we bring forward? So, and just to dispel any plans that somebody's making out there or misperceptions, when Rajat says that there are a couple of requirements. Yeah, I couldn't take the test here, I think, with all of these books behind me. I think that, they look at your camera, that's right. I can't, turn around and paint all the things on the wall. You have to show everyone what's going on and some different things. So it's a legitimate and rigorous process, but technology is wonderful, and our partners at Prometric Testing do a fantastic job, to make that precise. But Rajat, I wanted to come back to that comment that you made about the CX framework being like an MBA. And on the one hand, I agree with that because it is a common language, it is a common framework. But on the other hand, I also, am really uncomfortable with it because we don't know enough about what's going on in the higher education space. And we also, many people earn their MBA, and that's the end of their education. And I don't think that's the case for CCXP at all. I think CCXP is an entry point to the next level of your career. The ongoing education that's required to maintain your CCXP harkens to the fact that you don't just have to be a CCXP. You need to be involved. You need to be a thought leader. You need to be pressing yourself to take yourself to that next level if you and your company, are going to be successful. So those were some thoughts that were on my mind.
Yeah. I think thanks for clarifying that. In fact, I'm a big believer of that. I did my MBA 15 years back, and my education started after I came out of the B school, right? So, and I just recently shared something, while I was trying to look at how can we simplify this and how can we tell everybody has something with CX. And I came up with the 7 tracks. And interestingly, more than 5,000 people liked it on LinkedIn. They viewed it. Around 111 people liked it, and there were more than 14 countries from where I got a response to that framework. And it was the 7 tracks. And my message was that whether you're a consultant, coach, whether you're a CX specialist, whether you're a delivery person, operational person, sales, marketing, HR, everybody has something to do with CX. And I think I fully agree. When we do this CXPA Masterclass, most of the people's journey take another level of quantum jump, because they suddenly see, oh, okay, these competencies, I always thought CX is a process thing. CX is good engagement with the customer. But so absolutely, I think the learning curve, I would say, gets more momentum. I would say even more clarity. And they also have a roadmap. Okay. And some people would want to be generalist. Some people may want to go deep dive into some of the domains. Right? You want to add something there?
I love that pathways that you put out there,
Okay.
and that will be very much at the core of a project that CXPA has on the agenda for 2021, and that is really to say, okay, how do we document the different career pathways for people as they come into CX, and then also navigate the space, because as we've alluded to, most CX professionals aren't fortunate enough to become a CX leader at one organization and stay there until they retire. Most CX professionals are folks that have gotten the bug about CX. They love leading change. And either when they've stood up a program and it's been successful, they want to move on to their next opportunity, or a company gets frustrated because they haven't empowered that CX leader. They haven't equipped that CX leader. They haven't supported that CX program, and the CX program isn't getting the results that they want, and they change directions. So as a CX professional, it's important to be prepared for your next step. And as CXPA, we believe that it's our calling to support CX professionals throughout their entire space, whether that's being successful in your current job, getting a promotion in your current job, finding your next opportunity, or being prepared for a period of transition. Those are all areas that we're looking at. We're also looking at the question of where CX is being taught in colleges and universities. And the reason that we're doing that is there are a lot of programs that are out there that are perpetuating misconceptions. So the other day I saw a customer experience specialist certificate was available from a U.S. online university, and it would be a great program for anyone who is interested in becoming a call center agent. Kudos. However, if you took that program thinking you were going to get a CX job, that you're going to do a different job, you are going to find a disconnect between what employers are looking for and what you were trained at college and university. And that is not good for anyone. So we want to understand that. We want to see where the research is being done. We want to see what the cutting edge pieces are. And most of all, we want to have clarity and connection. And then the last piece that we'll be working on is that while we have the CCXP and we'll be updating the framework and doing that, we also want to begin to standardize the processes and the tools and the metrics and the approaches. Because right now, CX professionals have a tough job. They decide that they're going to bring something like journey mapping into their organization. And before they can get the organization to sign off and engage in journey mapping, they have to argue about 5 different ways that people do journey mapping. And, and that's unfair. Yeah, the accountants don't have to argue about the way they're going to record financial transactions in their books. We shouldn't have to argue about that in CX either.
Yeah, I think that's a great share, Greg, because even though I'm an RTP and I work with different kind of industries leaders who are CX focused or want to build a career in that, but I have my favorite tools. I have my favorite tools for doing journey mapping, and I have my own research and reason to pick, right? So, of course, somebody who has never worked in some of these areas is open. But I'm glad that you will have those standardizations, because I think CXPA has the position to drive that clarity, and I think more and more people will benefit from that. It'll make it easier for them to adopt to that, and it's really value add.
Yeah, and we are not planning on developing a cookie cutter playbook where it tells you to do your journey mapping X, Y, and Z, steps 1, 2, and 3. Instead, what we're going to say is that if you are engaging in journey mapping, you need to address these different elements. This is the audience, the people you need to develop, involve in making the map. These are the key characteristics that should be reflected in a map. And these are the types of time and resources that you should devote to not only making your map, but also using and keeping your maps up to date. So those are some places where, when you really start to look, you can shake out the difference between quality and incompleteness. And the challenge really in our field is that when people do something that's incomplete and it fails, but they've labeled it incorrectly, people think that the process doesn't work, when in fact you just didn't do the process correctly. I want to go back to that customer success space. I've in recent times had 2 individuals introduce themselves to me by letting them know that they are in charge of one called it customer experience, post-sales customer experience. And the other called it customer experience once you've been sold to. You hear that second term and your gut reaction is, wait, what a minute, wait, what? If you aren't thinking about the customer and the customer's experience in that initial discovery phase and in that initial purchase phase, there's no way you're going to be able to make that up and create ongoing customer experience and success after they've signed the contracts. The 2 things go hand in hand. And as you said earlier, it's holistic. We need to pull back and we need to look more broadly to make sure that we're really considering the big picture.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because I recall that when I'm working with, of course, as I said, sometimes it's marketing folks, sometimes it's CSM, as you just said, customer success managers. So everybody thinks their role has start point and an end point from that perspective. And as a consumer, if I see an ad, it says something, and then I am curious to explore that product, and that's an experience. And then I ended up buying that product, that's an experience. And then I'm a user, and that's an experience. And if all these are disconnected, and you would know many a times they are disconnected, they are like all coming from different planets, right? So then know, and that's the job of a customer experience professional, that it's end to end. It's even before you've got a customer, how much you know about them, so that your product is serving them at the needs that are existing. They know, and they may not even know those. And then how is the entire journey traversing from them, and they are becoming your raving fans. I'm using probably a cliche word, but eventually that's the thing that they keep coming back to you, and they talk about you to others. And that's where somewhere that NPS thing will come and say, okay, now my job is to just tell these are the raving fans. But that's a small element of the whole story.
I mean, metrics can be a great dashboard indicator, for how things are going, but they are not the end goal. And so that's the key is don't let don't get confused. But I will share with you before because I've taken a pot shot or two at customer success and customer service. We have to remember our authenticity too. And Dr. Anil Pillai posted a comic on LinkedIn today that the comic strip has a customer experience professional talking about what they do, and it gets to sort of the next penultimate panel, and the person says, but I'm just having trouble placing an order. and the person said, no, I'm in charge of customer experience. You have to talk to customer service. Yes. We have to keep in mind that, one, customer success and customer service are valued partners in delivering the customer experience. And two, as customer experience professionals, and this is, we can transition here to talk a little bit about 2021 and what we need to do as CX professionals. CX professionals can't let our thoughts about CX overtake the fundamental needs of the business as well. Right. It's great to create a customer-centric culture, but if you do that, or a brand, but if you do that at the expense of actually driving revenues, you're going to be the next pets.com, which was a very famous brand here in the US that got great commercials. Everybody liked it, but it sold nothing. Earlier this year, I was on a call, and a CX professional had asked the question. They said, right now we're having trouble getting people to engage in our employee experience initiative because we are focused, right now they're focused on shortcomings in our quarterly outcomes, our quarterly revenue. And the reality is, you know what? If we don't figure out a way to have an adequate response on quarterly revenues, there will be no employee experience. So we need to flip the question and say, okay, how do we use the employee experience to drive the quarterly revenues? How do we support both of those needs? They shouldn't be fighting against one another. They should be successful. And so, if you're a CX professional and you're listening and you haven't done this already, go back and look at what you said as your metric goals. Go back and look at what you said as your CX program goals, and make sure that they still make sense in this turbulent, topsy-turvy world that we're in, and adjust them if they don't.
Yeah, I think great point, Greg, and I'm glad. I think everybody who's listening or would watch or listen to this, I think what I really liked about it, it's a very golden nugget that sometimes CX professionals could get carried away by the experience element. And what Greg has just highlighted is all the business KPIs are always very, very critical. The business objectives, the quarterly objectives, you cannot, of course, you have to balance the employee experience, the customer experience, but all of this is responsible to really build brand, grow business, and all the other KPIs a business would have. And in fact, corroborating with what corroborate what you just said, Greg, I also went through recent Forrester research, and they said that it's that people would have trouble. Customer experience professionals would have trouble if they are not able to back it up with the business results, right? Yeah. And it's the latest one, right? So that's going to be the trend. We have seen probably a high side of CX. But thanks for highlighting that. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge some of the people who have taken time to be here. I can see Pranjal, I can see Lucas, Shiva Prasad, from Chaman. Chaman, thank you for being here. Ahad, so thanks for being here. I think I could see some of those names, and keep dropping in your Prasanna is there. Thank you for joining in. And I think I can see Gabe as well. Gabe, good to have you as well.
Gabe, get to work.
Gabe was curious to find out what are we going to talk about. So thanks for that.
He was, yeah. So for those of you who don't know, Gabe Smith, CCXP is CXPA's awesome content manager, and he was blessed with a beautiful baby girl just over 2 months ago. And so He's a real treasure to our community, as are you, Rajat. Let's talk a little bit about, what do you see, Rajat, as some of the areas of empathy and shift and change that CX professionals need to have in mind as we move into 2021? What's different about 2021?
Yeah, I think I'm seeing a lot and I'm experiencing a lot. I think you talked about that word authenticity, right? I think the authenticity, the trust, and I recently came across one of the leading big business houses. They did a survey and they talked to 100 marketeers from the top companies and asked them, what do you think is a trend, recently 2-3 weeks back? And everybody said that now you have to build trust before you build business. You have to talk about how you are truly service oriented before you start to talk about sales, right? So that shift, in different words, you may articulate it the way you may like it, but empathy is, I mean, I saw that as the first box in the design thinking, but I'm seeing it now because of whatever this world has gone through. This is really very, very, very critical, and we are feeling that transformation actually as human beings. And I think first we are human beings and then CX professionals. And I think CX professionals have that duty. Many a times, I've seen that transformation when we work together in our programs. They say, oh, empathy, now I understand. And sometimes I share that framework, credits to Brene Brown. She talks beautifully about the difference between sympathy and empathy. Empathy is like really being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, and sympathy could be trying to motivate the other person. Okay, I understand, it happens, right? So beautifully she has talked about that. I would highly recommend it. But I think that's a real shift that's happening, and CX professional has a great opportunity there.
Yeah, and I think on that idea of building trust, some of the things that have traditionally been there, have been there: transparency, authenticity, the words and branding that people choose. But some things are new. Now people want to understand, will the employees be wearing a mask if we're coming in together in person? What are the return policies? What happens if my circumstances change after I make a buying decision? How can I track and be aware of where things are? Because here in the U.S., I don't know about the case around the world. A lot of the delivery systems have shifted and changed. Many more deliveries going out, but manufacturing timelines, are much different, than they used to be. As a matter of fact, we moved in the middle of all of this. We moved back in July, and so we've ordered some new furniture. And the other day, one of the brands that we ordered furniture from had a huge faux pas to me. They had not sent me any update to tell me about the production schedule, but instead they sent me a note telling me that they were going to cancel my order within the next 48 hours if I didn't contact them about a credit card issue, that was on their, on the order. And the irony was, it was the credit card I signed up for in the store. When I went there, they say to me, sign up for this credit card. It will make it easy. And then all of a sudden they're, the first contact I get from them a week later. And you're like, this is just crazy, And so it's, really thinking about that question of trust and safety. Those are some big pieces, that are there. And I think the question of how you market in a way that is aware of what's going on in people's lives. There's a great convention center here in the States that now is showing some great footage of their facilities, but the only call to action on it says, we're ready for you when you're ready to come back. That got across the same message as everything else, but it acknowledges that many people aren't ready to travel and participate in meetings at this time.
Right. Yeah, I think these are great examples, and I fully agree with you. somebody who is in retail business, a friend of mine has retail chains, and he reached out to me asking, our business is impacted. Do you have some ideas? And I had not stepped out, or at that time. But later when I stepped out, I could see a clear difference between one retail chain and the one running next to that, door to door, one door. So when I entered the one, it was from a big brand, very customer centric. And I think I really liked what you said. They could actually demonstrate the element of trust by the way we were greeted. Of course, they were basic, things that, taking care of your hygiene, really using the sprays and all that, and wearing a mask, all of them. But we could feel confident that this is safe, right? And we just could shop. That was my recent first experience after almost like months of lockdown. So I could get that trust. And that was my advice to my friend. I said, I could see a big brand doing it like this, another one doing like this. The other brand didn't care. You are there, you're not there, it's okay. So we could experience that. And I think that's a great point about the trust and the safety. I think that's what I would go for as a consumer. And anybody who's able to demonstrate that and being a little more really open and empathetic towards what's going to happen. So Greg, I think great. Just want to know from you, this year has been pretty interesting. What do you see is the future in 2021 of customer experience professionals? And while I'm asking you this question, I also want to underline and probably give an extension to that. Sometimes I see some CX professionals getting concerned about their future, right? Of course, I'm seeing a big opportunity there, and people are really seeing it as an upcoming opportunity. But do you also see that? And what's the hope that you see truly in this profession? What would you tell people to look forward to? What should they be looking forward to getting ready for to make most of this?
Yeah, well, let's go ahead and turn the calendar back, a year ago to this time when Forrester released its 2020 predictions. And in their 2020 predictions, they had this idiosyncratic set of predictions. One was that CX positions were going to increase by at least 25%. And the other was that at least 1 in 4 CX professionals would lose their jobs. So you're like, wait, what kind of hedge bet is that? And I think the truth is that actually they were right on both counts. Is that the growth in CX professionals as a career is undeniable if you look at the overall numbers. That's why colleges and universities are starting programs. That's why if you go and Google CX professional jobs, that you see that across the world there are over 100,000 jobs open at almost any given time that use that term, CX professional. The challenge is that not all of them are equal. And the question is, how do you get one of the jobs that is really in line with what you want to do and is really supported by the company? So we did a LinkedIn Live at CXPA a couple weeks ago about earning the CCXP, and talked a little bit about this with Chris Rios, who's one of our passionate members who also happens to be a consultant who helps CX professionals find placement. So there's some things that I think each of us should think about and look at. First and foremost, yes, it is incredibly tough for each of us as an individual when we go through a career transition moment, particularly when it's unexpected. But that doesn't mean that you should take the first job opening that you hear of. It's really important that you're joining a company that values customer experience if you're going to be a customer experience professional. Because if you are not empowered to lead that CX change, if you are not given the systems to do that, if you're not given the executive level support to work across different organizational silos, you're not going to be able to be successful. And you're going to end up in that 25% of CX professionals that lose their job. So you'll get a new job just to lose it. So don't do that. On the other hand, if you want to be part of the growing success, if you want your company to be the next Amazon or Zappos or success story out there, look for that support from the C-suite. Look for a customer experience professional position that is looking for a CCXP or otherwise designates that this person is going to be a catalyst who works across the entire organization to drive CX change. The other thing is prepare to do better. It's not enough for you to get the job and to deliver the results that you did last year. CX is not about being stationary. It is about driving change. It's about giving better results to the future. And that means keeping up with the trends in customer experience. It means keeping up your skills with the latest technique. It means keeping aware of the latest software that's out there and the tools that you can use to deliver the experience that you've designed. And that is not a solitary job. That's why you should be part of a community like this and CXPA India or CXPA globally, so that you have that network of people who have been there and have done that and can help you deliver the right custom solution to your organization. But the biggest thing there is it's time to take control of your career. If you are not proactively thinking about how you are going to be a better CX professional next year than you are right now, you stand to become one of that 25% that is going to experience an unexpected job loss.
Yeah, I think, Greg, this is like a diamond nugget. I mean, the amazing points you made. And I think I'm glad that you talked about this. What everybody who's listening, or what would watch it, it's you see what Greg is saying is take control. I think I also hear there's a great opportunity, but like any other job, you have to demonstrate your value and keep innovating, keep creating a differentiation with what you bring to the table. And I think CCXP itself is a very credible certification. And I don't know anybody like CXPA with more than 40,000 followers on LinkedIn and thousands of members. And the way it's growing now, it shows that there is a lot of opportunity. On LinkedIn itself, I observed 18 million CX professionals, unlike 5 years back when probably, I was a 209th CCXP. Now you said there are like 1,000 plus. So there's a great opportunity, but I think great point there that many a times I see people work very hard to get CCXP and they get it and they think, they've arrived and that's the end. Yeah. That's the beginning, because then what Greg said is you have to then demonstrate the mettle that you have gone through. If it's a mindset change, if it's a skill set improvement, all that then needs to be really meaningful. And the other thing that I really love, Greg, what you said, one of my favorite thing is don't just go for any first job where it says CX dash. You please wait if the leadership is sponsoring it, if the company is putting the money where their words are, and they are ready to be in that for long-term game. And great examples of Amazon and Zappos, and I think we keep hearing only very handful. So there is a lot of opportunity at the top of the pyramid.
There is a lot of opportunity, and as we started, it's a bright day here in Columbia, South Carolina, but it's a bright day for CX. This is an incredibly passionate group of people. This is an extraordinarily large opportunity ahead for us. We're only beginning to have people understand that great customer experience and great results is not just the unicorn story of one or two startups. It is what's behind the transformation of existing brands. It's what's helping small nonprofits outpace their competitors. And it is what's making CX professionals excited when they wake up each day that they get to do this for a living. They get to make customers happy, and it's just a fantastic field to be in. I'm so thrilled. Thank you, Rajat, for the chance to be with you today. I've enjoyed our conversation, and I think maybe we should schedule and do another one of these at the springtime and talk about what's come along and where pieces are, because I always learn a lot when I chat with you.
I love that suggestion, Greg. I think I wanted to keep going, but thank you for reminding me. We're just close to an hour. So yes, absolutely, we'll plan another one. I just want to thank a few more people who joined in. I think Chaman, thank you for putting those Shep Hyken and James Dotkin information there. It was you, I found out. Thank you. And Bayola, I hope I could get your pronunciation of your name a little close. Thanks for being there. Webho, thank you for joining. Many of those people I know. So thanks for being there. Let me just see if I missed someone. Great. I think many more people will be watching it. I really want to thank Greg. It's an honor. You just heard probably the biggest visionary for customer experience profession. And these are really amazing insights. And I'm blessed and thankful that, CXPA exists. Thank God CXPA exists, and thank God that we have leaders, Greg, like you, and Gabe, if you're there, and all the entire team that's serving, really beautifully and making the world a better place, Greg. So, final words from you, if you have any, before we.
Yeah, thank you. No, I want to wish everybody well. I want to ask one piece of help, and that piece of help is we've talked a lot today about how important it is to really get people to join together in this common definition of CX. And so I just ask everyone, if you're watching, to consider sharing a website out to your network. That's www.whatiscx.com. And that will take you to the portion of the CXPA website that has the definition of CX and a few other resources that I think are important for us to make sure we get in front of the C-suite, we get in front of students, we get in front of interested fans, and most importantly, we get in front of CX professionals that want to take control of their career. So whatiscx.com.
Whatiscx.com. Great. I think that's wonderful. I would also love to share that information. I wasn't aware. Thank you, Greg. That's a gift that makes it so easy for anyone, and that's really most needed. And I also want to remind every one of you, CXPA is a great place to network. So if you're not a member, please look at the website. I keep hearing from people they have not seen anything so comprehensive, so detailed, and so holistic when it comes to CX profession, and that's a reality. You can check that for yourself, and I think already link has been shared by Greg. And also, please aspire to be a CCXP, and I think Greg talked about it. It's not the end, it's the beginning of the journey. Right, so with that...
and then we'll leave that. This is not the end either. It's the beginning of a journey, and I'll look forward to the next conversation as well, Rajat.
Same here, Greg. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.